Okay, today's Q&A is about sushi. And the question is, sushi seems pretty simple, just rice and vegetables. So are there any kashrus issues to think about? So, like with most kashrus issues, the first thing we think about is ingredients. And the most obvious things that need hashgacha when we think about sushi are the vinegar, seaweed, soy sauce, and the fish. And I'll just say briefly, vinegar can come from wine, from stam yain, or it can be made on the same equipment as stam yain. Some kinds of seaweed have insects in them. Soy sauce is fermented, which has ingredient and equipment issues. And fish is not kosher unless it has scales on it. Okay, we've talked about a lot of these issues at other times in this series. But anyway, so those are the ingredient issues. So assuming, but all the ingredients are kosher, another important thing is that a Jewish person has to be involved in the cooking of the rice and the fish to make sure they're b'shri Yisrael. And a particular challenge that there is to make sushi rice b'shri Yisrael is that the rice cookers, as a rule, most rice cookers turn off automatically when the rice gets fully cooked or if you take the pot out of the machine. That means every time a new batch of rice is made, Mashgiach has to be there to turn the rice on, as opposed to, let's say, in an oven where he turns it on once and it could stay on all day long. The rice cooker, he has to pay attention to make sure he's always turning it on each time they put another pot of rice up to cook. Now, a question that comes up is that since people make sushi with raw fish, there are such a thing as sushi made with raw fish. Does that mean that fish is considered edible raw? If it would be considered edible raw, then it doesn't need b'shri Yisrael. I told you the concern for the rice and the fish is that it has to be cooked and needs b'shri Yisrael. But maybe the fact that some sushi uses raw fish should mean that fish doesn't ever need to be b'shri Yisrael at all, not just for sushi. So there are three answers to this question. The first is, it's not so clear if most people in the United States, or in a particular city in the United States, would eat sushi made with raw fish. So it exists, but how many people, is it really the majority of people who would eat it as is? That's a question. Second is, eating actual pure raw fish as is, it's called sashimi, is rather uncommon. So even if people eat raw fish as part of sushi, there's an argument that says that's just adding a tanginess or like a spiciness to the food, but it doesn't yet come to the point that fish is considered edible raw, because people won't eat the fish as is raw. The last thing is that only the fish which is the freshest and finest fish is able to be used for sushi, and that as opposed to the fish that you use for smoking and canning and things like that are not sushi grade. So even if sushi grade fish might be considered edible raw, other forms are not, and therefore, for these three reasons, it's assumed that fish needs b'shri Yisrael. Now, two other questions that are relevant to kosher consumers, not about kashrus per se, are the bracha on sushi and whether you can make it on Shabbos. So, as relates to brachas, questions like this. The role of sushi can be made of things that have many different brachas. The rice is mezainis, the avocados are ha'etz, the vegetables are hadama, and the fish is shahakal. So what's the bracha when it has so many different things together? So the answer depends on two different questions. First is, should we view sushi as one item? So then you're only going to pick one bracha. I'll talk about what that one bracha would be in a second. You pick one bracha. Or is it separate items? It's rice plus vegetables plus fish. Each one is separate from each other, and then each one needs its own bracha. That's the first question. The second is, if we would consider it to be one item, then do we pick the bracha by the one that has the main ingredient? I'm sorry, we do pick the bracha by the one that's the main ingredient. So is that the rice? That's the thing that's the largest component, has the most volume, and that's why we call it sushi. Or is it the fish, vegetables, etc., which we want to eat this particular roll? So the answer to these two different questions depend partially on what people prefer, a personal preference, and also on different opinions in the poskim. So consumers should speak to their rabbi about what the right bracha he believes they should be making on these foods are. Now, as far as making sushi on Shabbos, there's some different reasons why you might not be allowed to. One is you're not allowed to cut foods into very fine, small pieces. That's considered a type of taichin, grinding. You could avoid this by cutting the vegetables and fish before Shabbos, or make sure the pieces are not so small. And actually, some people even hold that you're allowed to do taichin if it's right by the meal. So that's one question: is there a shaila of taichin for cutting into small pieces? But a more serious issue is it might be considered boina or building to mold these pieces into one combined unit. So here again, poskim have different opinions about this. Some say it's completely asur. Some say boina is only if you make it in a professional manner, where it's like these beautiful creations, very presentable. So as just like I mentioned with the brachas, if you want to know whether you can or can't actually make sushi, you should turn to your rabbi and ask him to direct you as to which way you should practice.